idea that we're sleepwalking into a nuclear armed Iran with no thought about the consequences. The Iranian regime is particularly prone to conspiracy theories. There's a lot of paranoia about its position, about who's trying to undermine it. And that, of course, is often looked at both internally and externally. So externally, obviously, the people who always get the blame for anything that happens will be either the great Satan, the US, or the little Satan, Israel, language of the regime, used to just kind of tarnish whatever happens with the hand of the enemy, basically. What might spark a movement of unrest is what happens in the choice of a replacement. Often elections have been kind of catalysts for people kind of standing up and saying, we don't think what's going on in our country is right, you're cheating. And the regime has had a great record of cheating over many years, as you know. It has elections, but it has elections where it chooses the candidates who can stand. And reformist and democratic candidates are never allowed to stand, or very rarely allowed to stand. And I don't suspect will be allowed to stand this time. Now, if there's such a blatant rigging of the poll again this time, that may well spark a sort of more extreme unrest, people saying we've had enough of this regime, its failure to take course, to listen to what the people want, we have to take more action. And that would be a dangerous moment again for the regime, with a bit of a shuffle at the top. But Iran will stay on its path of opposition to the West, stay on its path of opposition to Israel, stay on its path of opposition to other Sunni Arab Gulf states, and will continue to be a spoiler in the region. By common consensus, the assumption is, the working assumption is that they could, if they wanted to build a nuclear bomb now, they couldn't deploy it necessarily, but they could build one because they've reached the, and once you reach a certain level of uranium enrichment, I mean, they've already gone to 80% in various, but you've gone to places where you're close to the 90%. You don't need much more in order to get the uranium level that's required. They've made their statement already, basically, which is, we're close to this. We are, on the cusp of getting the nuclear bomb. Iranians have openly broken the joint comprehensive plan of action that we in the UK have signed up to, and other countries have signed up to. The US pulled out, of course, and we've done nothing about it. There've been no sanctions on them. Nobody has snapped back things. Nobody has said this is a problem. So they've kind of gotten away with it. They've been enriching uranium, increasing the number of centrifuges, doing all the things you need to do to get to that nuclear breakout level, and they've been unpunished. Many problems would arise from this. It's something the world absolutely needs to stop happening. And if there's any sort of moral from the lesson here, which is if the regime changes its players, it's not going to change its tune. It has to be that the West changes its tune towards allowing this regime to get closer and closer to that nuclear threshold, because that is a great danger to the entire world. The point of the sanctions is to dismantle the regime ultimately, because it's to increase the economic pressure on the regime and either force it to comply with international norms of behavior, or things become so bad in Iran that everyone rises up, and even the military and the besieged, their militia, are no longer willing to defend the regime because it's just a mess. And we've seen other regimes that crumble essentially because people no longer believe in them and in their ability to deliver change or reform. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, in the fullest extent, if Iran continues to breach international rules, we have seen in the past international action, including military action, to force them into compliance. So the question, therefore, is, how far down that path the world is prepared to go, and how far non-military pressure can go in getting the regime to change its mind.
If the regime was challenged with the successor for the supreme leader, now they are doubly challenged, because now they have to find a successor for a president and a supreme leader. So with that said, you have to remember how Raisi rose to power. This is a guy whose record was based on multiple massacres, and more notably was the massacre of the 30,000 political prisoners in 1988, based on a fatwa that essentially authorized him to eliminate 30,000 political prisoners in a short period of time who were still committed to Iran's main opposition, the Mujahideen Khalq, MEK. So Raisi had that proven record. And then subsequent to that, we saw the massacre of the 2019, we saw the massacres of the uprisings in 2022, and even the rise of executions over the last several months. And of course, his record of massacres and human rights are just one dimension of how evil and how brutal this man was. If you look at his terrorist activities and what he did on the behest of the Iran's supreme leaders, if you look at his drive for the proxy war in the region, I guess one indicator is the comments by Hamas leader during the funeral, where he praised Raisi about how it's critical to really fight the fight in the region. So when you put all of that together, Raisi was in the making to become a successor of Iran's supreme leader because of the fact that he was 100% committed to that office. He delivered on every ask when it came to brutality, when it came to violence, when it came to wars. So, and that's the supreme leader Ali Khamenei is looking for. So, so I would say his regime is now facing a major strategic blow. Regime can replace presidents because they're kind of dime a dozen. They can replace foreign ministers because of the fact that he has a lot of criminals in his network, but his inner circle shrunk significantly in favor of Raisi, for Raisi to become the president because of who he was looking for and because how he was grooming Raisi and because how he was really looking for someone that can really 100% carry out the violence and the backward ideology of a supreme leader in Iran. This is where Khamenei sees his path to survival. Now he doesn't have a runway to groom another one. And let me give you a quick indicator. If you look at the streets of Iran post Raisi's death, the celebrations, the fireworks, the passing out of the sweets, the comments and the clips that are coming from inside Iran really tells you how this is resonating with the Iranian people and how they're seeing a new opening for the massive blow to this regime, whether it comes in a form of nationwide uprising or any other form. Tehran's regime is in disarray as we speak. So I think Majid spoke to the fact that they had this strategic framework, which included two pillars: violence and crackdown at home, proxy war in the region. And this is how the regime maintained its balance. So it's less about the escalation of Hamas war, because Hamas leaders are now in their think tank and their boardrooms, not figuratively speaking, but figuratively speaking, and trying to figure out how to recover from this blow now that they're dealing with a mastermind who is weak at home, who no longer has a Raisi at the helm to keep and crack down on demand based on what Iran's supreme leader wants. IRGC, this brutal regime, who is weak but still very violent, will kill until the very last minute. This noise that we're seeing about the root cause of the crash will have two impacts. One impact is it would open the space so that the regime can establish its own narrative and really distract the conversation from losing a major player in the succession planning of the supreme leader. And then the other point would be that regardless how this happened, we're dealing with the regime that's now running in a chaos. Doesn't matter who was behind it, whether it was nature or otherwise. If the regime continues to start stirring that up, it's only going to backfire and it's on Tehran.
This regime is irreparably damaged, and it will provide the opportunity for this. We can't give you a time and date as to when that will occur. The revolutions don't advertise themselves. Mm-hmm. But what we do know is this regime is significantly weaker, strategically weaker. I think if you look at it from certainly Raisi is an individual who's essentially a boogeyman. It's an enforcer for the Ayatollah's mafia. And to Ramesh's point, his loss is significant. The Godfather may find another enforcer, but finding of that set of qualification and brutality will be somewhat difficult. And maintaining the wolves in the regime from attacking each other will be more difficult for the regime. That's why it's a strategic blow to the Ayatollah. as the conflict inside Iran between the people of Iran and the regime, as the war escalates and the regime escalates its war with the people of Iran, that level of violence against the people of Iran is simultaneous with the level of violence. I mean, they're parallel, they go up together, they're synchronized. And so because that war inside Iran continues to escalate, you can expect, if that framework holds true, which has held true from its beginning, that you will see an escalation in violence outside of Iran by way of necessity. And that's an unfortunate reality. The West is actually in front of literally preventing a future uprising in Iran by interfering. And so that's the purpose of resolutions like House Resolution 1148, because they're saying, listen, it is time, to your point, that the international community actually recognizes the people of Iran's plight to change this regime rather than the current policy of changing the regime's behavior.